As much as I love sharp angles and crisp corners in my furniture, it's always fun to try and get it around, always being so square. As woodworkers, we always love to incorporate small details to enhance a piece of furniture. But my personal tastes definitely lead me to be much more interested in the overall design of a piece. And it's always fun to make fairly simple changes to what would be a standard design to create something unique. In the case of this dining table, there's nothing too wild about its actual design or construction. It's essentially a normal dining table with 4 legs and an apron, but with a few simple changes like rounding each end of the tabletop, using cylindrical legs instead of square ones, and setting back the side aprons by a few inches, the overall look of the piece completely changes. So with my design ready to go, I started by building the tabletop. I used 5/4 red oak boards for this, which I jointed and planed off camera, then I brought them to my table saw to clean up the edges and get them ready to glue up. Once I had them ready to go, I temporarily clamped everything together so I could get a rough idea of where the curved ends would be. And I did this so I could then lay out where the dominoes would go so that I minimized the chance of cutting into any of them when cutting the table to final shape. With the tabletop glued up, I could start working on shaping the round ends. So I marked the center of the circle, then used my fancy circle cutting jig to start cutting the shape. I did this in a few passes with a 1/4 inch spiral router bit until I got a little more than halfway through the tabletop. I then finished the cut with my jigsaw and flush trimmed the remainder. With that, I was ready to start working on the legs. And the first step was to glue up some blanks, as I needed the finished legs to be about 2.5 inches in diameter, so I made these to just under 3 inches square. Once the glue had dried, I ripped the corner edges off of each one to make them easier to turn, which turned out to be a good call. And that reminds me, I've been meaning to give Chris a call to ask him about something.
Hey man, how's it going?
Hey, I had a quick question about...
Whoa, hey, what do you got there? What are you drinking?
Trade coffee?
Okay. Oh man, this is really good. What is it?
Trade.
I kind of want to keep it now, but what is it?
Trade coffee.
No trade. Me keep.
Dude, we're not cavemen. I'm telling you, it's called trade coffee.
Well, whatever it is, I'm keeping it.
All right, whatever, man. I guess I'll go make myself a new cup.
So the great thing about trade coffee is that as someone who enjoys a cup of joe in the morning, but who doesn't necessarily consider myself a coffee connoisseur, Trade makes it easy for anyone to find the perfect coffee for their taste preferences. I took a simple online quiz which was able to match me with one of the over 400 different ethically sourced coffees that Trade offers. It also allowed me to select the exact way I prefer to make my coffee, and everything is roasted to order, so you're sure to get the freshest coffee possible. And all of that for just about the best price for this quality of coffee anywhere. And the best part about it is that Trade is giving the first 100 people who click the link below 30% off your first coffee. So just click the link in the description below. Alright, Thanks, Trade. Let's get back to the build. So, as I was saying, I would be turning the table legs. So here's the latest addition to the shop and the first brand new machine I have ever purchased. One of the ways I've always looked at buying new machines is that I wouldn't do it unless a paying job actually necessitated the purchase. And since buying pre-made cylindrical legs was certainly an option, I felt it wouldn't really make for compelling video content, and I've wanted to get more into turning for a long time now. On top of that, Chris and I split the cost, so that helped too. So you can see I turned each leg by first cutting down a few evenly spaced spots along each leg to final dimension. Then essentially turned down the remainder of the material between each of these spots until I had a long cylinder. For having very little experience with turning, I was pretty happy with how they turned out. And with some sanding, I got a really nice result, and I can't wait to keep trying new things on the lathe. With the legs done, I could cut all the parts needed for the apron and the under table supports. This consisted of 2 long pieces for the sides, 2 medium length pieces for the ends, and 2 shorter pieces that would be the cross supports, which I cut later. So with all of these parts ready to go, I could get into the fun stuff, and that was cutting the joinery to attach the cylinder legs to the apron. Because the side aprons are set back by a few inches, I decided to essentially cut a mortise into the top of each leg that would allow the end aprons to slot into the legs. To do this, I set up my router table with a 1/2-inch spiral bit and a stop block. I then made a very simple sled that I could clamp the legs into. I then started by taking shallow passes with the fence positioned so that I was cutting the left edge of the mortise. Once I had raised the router bit up to the finished depth of the mortise, I could shift the fence over slightly and take a couple passes until I snuck up on a perfect fit. The last thing I needed to do was square up the bottom corners with a chisel, then do a test fit. And with all of those done and everything fitting nicely, I could glue up the 2 end assemblies. From there, I could cut in dominoes to first assemble the long stretchers, as well as a couple cross supports, which I glued up first. And when that was dry, I could assemble the entire base. So with With the main components of the table complete, I could get to finishing, and I sprayed on about 4 coats of General Finishes satin black poly, which went on really nicely. So usually this would be the part where the build pretty much wraps up, but unfortunately when I set the tabletop on the base, there was a small problem. The table swayed quite a bit along its length due to having the side aprons inset, and I had a feeling this would be the case, but I figured I would cross that bridge when I got there. And, well, I guess I was there. Luckily, it was a fairly easy fix. I just cut some corner braces that I glued into place to add some rigidity to the legs. And with those in place, I could attach the tabletop with tabletop buttons. I didn't film much of this part as I have an entire video about these over on my channel, and I'll put a link to that in the description. Thank you as always for watching. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed this one. Links to everything are in the description, so check those out. It really helps to support the channel, as well as some links to my website where I have some furniture for sale, as well as furniture plans and some other things. So go check all of that out if you're interested. And of course, until next time, if you love sharp angles but have been wanting to break out of the box, get yourself a lathe and a circle cutting jig and add some curves to your design toolbox.